The front door was still swinging behind me when I heard footsteps racing across the hallway. Before I could even put my duffel bag down, someone slammed into my chest with enough force to knock the air out of my lungs. Arms wrapped around me so tightly that I could barely breathe. My roommate, Rowan Mercer, buried his face against my shoulder and refused to let go. His whole body was trembling, and for one terrifying moment I thought something horrible had happened. I had returned from overseas 2 weeks earlier than anyone expected, hoping to surprise the only person who had ever made my tiny apartment feel like home. Instead, it felt as though my unexpected return had saved someone who had been holding themselves together by a single thread. Before we continue this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the Kindness Project if you believe that one act of compassion can completely change someone's life. Your support helps these heartfelt stories reach people who need them most. For almost a year, I had been working overseas on a demanding engineering contract. The money was good, but every day felt longer than the last. Endless construction sites, unfamiliar streets, and lonely hotel rooms slowly wore away the excitement that had once pushed me to leave. Through it all, Rowan kept our friendship alive. Every Sunday he sent photos of our apartment, our old coffee maker that refused to die, the little balcony garden he somehow managed to keep alive despite forgetting to water it half the time, and the stray orange cat that had adopted our building. His messages never sounded lonely. They were always full of jokes, sarcastic comments, and stories about work. Looking back now, I realized he had hidden the truth better than anyone I had ever known. When my company finished the project ahead of schedule, I booked the earliest flight home without telling anyone. I imagined Rowan complaining that I had interrupted his peaceful evening or laughing because I had forgotten my own apartment keys again. I never imagined seeing relief instead of surprise. The apartment looked different the moment I stepped inside. The curtains were closed even though it was bright outside. Dirty dishes sat untouched in the sink. Dust covered the television stand. The cheerful apartment that once echoed with music had fallen silent. Rowan looked thinner than I remembered. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes, and his smile disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. Although he insisted he was fine, everything around him whispered a different story. Over the next several days, I noticed little things that refused to leave my mind. Bills remained unopened on the kitchen counter. The refrigerator held almost nothing except leftovers and bottled water. Rowan barely slept. Sometimes I heard him pacing through the apartment before sunrise. Other nights he sat alone on the balcony staring into the distance while the city slowly woke beneath the golden morning sky. I finally learned the truth by accident. A letter slipped from one of the unopened envelopes while I was cleaning. It revealed months of overdue rent notices. Rowan had quietly covered my share while I was overseas after learning my final overseas payment had been delayed because of paperwork. Rather than worrying me while I was thousands of miles away, he had worked extra shifts, sold many of his belongings, and borrowed money simply to protect the apartment until I came home. Then his company downsized, and he lost his job only weeks before my return. The weight of that discovery settled heavily inside me. I had spent months believing I was sacrificing for a better future, while the person who mattered most had been sacrificing everything just to keep my future intact. His silence had never been pride. It had been love expressed through loyalty. Instead of confronting him immediately, I quietly began rebuilding our lives together. I used nearly all the money I had saved overseas to pay the overdue rent and every outstanding bill. I repaired the apartment one room at a time, filled the refrigerator with groceries, and replaced the broken light bulbs that had left half the apartment in darkness. I even bought fresh flowers for the small table beside the window because Rowan always believed flowers made ordinary days feel hopeful. One afternoon, I convinced him to join me for a walk through the neighborhood park. The sun was warm, children laughed across the playground, and families spread picnic blankets across the green grass. It felt like the first truly peaceful day either of us had experienced in months. Rowan admitted he had almost given up. Every rejection after another failed job interview had chipped away at his confidence. Watching friends move forward while he stood still had convinced him he was becoming invisible. I understood that feeling more than he realized. Overseas, despite the larger paycheck, I had often questioned whether chasing success had cost me the people who gave my life meaning. Standing beside Rowan that afternoon, I realized achievement meant very little if it left the people you loved carrying impossible burdens alone. Together we started again. We updated his resume, practiced interviews every morning, and reached out to old contacts who still remembered his remarkable work ethic. Days turned into weeks filled with cautious optimism instead of fear. Every small victory became something worth celebrating, whether it was a promising interview, a returned phone call, or simply sharing breakfast without worrying about unpaid bills waiting in the mailbox. Then one bright morning everything changed. Rowan received an offer from a respected architecture firm that valued not only his experience but also his resilience. Watching him read the email over and over with tears quietly filling his eyes became one of the happiest moments I had ever witnessed. It wasn't merely about employment. It was proof that difficult seasons eventually pass, even when they seem endless. Life slowly returned to the apartment. Music played again while we cooked dinner together. The balcony garden bloomed with fresh herbs and colorful flowers. The old coffee maker still groaned every morning, refusing retirement despite countless promises to replace it. Even the orange stray cat resumed sleeping outside our door as though it knew peace had finally returned. Months later, Rowan admitted something that stayed with me forever. He confessed that on the morning I came home unexpectedly, he had been preparing to pack his remaining belongings because he believed he had failed completely. He intended to disappear before I returned so I would never see what his life had become. My early arrival had interrupted that decision. The hug that nearly knocked me over had not simply been excitement. It had been the desperate embrace of someone who suddenly realized they no longer had to face life alone. That realization changed me forever. We often believe grand gestures save lives, yet sometimes it is simply showing up at the right moment. A surprise visit, a listening ear, a meal shared in silence, a hug held a few seconds longer than usual. These ordinary acts can become extraordinary lifelines for someone silently fighting battles we never knew existed. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with someone who may need hope today, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Your support allows these messages of kindness and second chances to reach people who might desperately need them. Special request: before this story ends, please comment with the words, "No one should face life alone." Your message may encourage someone reading the comments who feels forgotten today. As I often think back to that sunny afternoon when I walked through my apartment door 2 weeks earlier than planned, I no longer remember the long flight, the heavy luggage, or the exhausting months overseas. I remember only one unforgettable moment: a friend running into my arms with tears he could no longer hide. Sometimes the greatest homecoming isn't about returning to a place. It's about arriving just in time to remind another human being that they are loved, valued, and never truly alone. And in a world that often moves too fast to notice silent pain, perhaps the greatest gift we can ever offer each other is simply being there when it matters most.